I still hear the knocking sometimes. For soft, desperate taps against the wood at 4:30 in the morning. Like little hearts beating against a door they weren't sure would open. When I pulled the curtain aside and saw them standing there on my porch. My brother's 2 children, shivering in thin cotton pajamas, bare feet blue on the concrete, breath fogging in the cold Islamabad winter air. Something inside my chest cracked open and never quite closed again. Little Aisha was clutching her brother's sleeve so tight her knuckles were white. Zain, only 7, tried to stand tall, but his bottom lip trembled like he was holding back an entire ocean. No coats, no shoes, no mother, no father. Just the 2 of them and the bitter wind that cuts through the narrow lanes of G9 at that hour. I opened the door so fast it banged against the wall. "Fuppo?" Aisha whispered, voice so small it barely carried. "Baba said. He said we should come here." I dropped to my knees right there on the threshold and pulled them both into me. Their skin was ice. Their hair smelled of sleep and fear and the faint strawberry shampoo my sister-in-law always used. I could feel their hearts hammering against my ribs like trapped birds. Inside, blankets, socks, hot milk with cardamom the way my mother used to make it. I moved on autopilot, every mother instinct I never knew I still had roaring awake. While the kettle hissed, I kept glancing at their faces, searching for answers they were too young to give. They fell asleep on the living room rug 20 minutes later, curled into each other like commas, still holding hands. I sat on the sofa in the dark and watched them breathe, the streetlight painting thin gold bars across their cheeks. My phone stayed silent. No call, no message, no frantic knock from my brother or his wife coming to collect what they'd abandoned. That silence was louder than any scream. For the next 3 hours I sat there remembering. My brother Asif and I were once inseparable. 2 years apart, same eyes, same stubborn jaw, same habit of biting the inside of our cheeks when we were nervous. Growing up in our tiny government quarter in F7, we shared everything. Bunk beds, secrets, the last piece of Andaparatha. When our father died young, Asif became the man of the house at 16. I was 14 and watched him try to carry grief and responsibility at the same time. He never complained. He just became harder, quieter. I married at 23, moved to my husband's house in G9. Asif married 2 years later. Saba, beautiful, sharp-tongued, always dressed like she was going somewhere better than where she actually was. They had Aisha first, then Zain. For a while, everything looked perfect on the outside. Eat selfies, new car, renovated kitchen. But I noticed the small things. The way Saba's smile never reached her eyes when Asif spoke. The way Asif stopped mentioning her name in conversations. The way the children grew quieter each time I visited. I told myself it wasn't my place. Every marriage has cracks. Every couple fights. I had my own life, my husband's long hospital shifts, our daughter studying in Lahore, the small tuition classes I ran from the front room. I didn't want to borrow trouble. But trouble, it seems, doesn't wait for an invitation. At 8:17 that morning my phone finally lit up. Asif's name. I answered on the second ring. "Where are they?" His voice was flat, almost bored. "With me," I said. My throat felt lined with sandpaper. Safe, warm, federal. A long pause. I could hear traffic in the background. A horn. Someone laughing far away. "Good," he said. "Keep them till evening. We'll come." And he hung up. No explanation. No apology. No, "Are they okay?" I stared at the screen until it went dark. Zain woke up first. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, looking around like he'd forgotten where he was. "Fuppo, is Amy coming soon?" I swallowed the stone in my throat. "I don't know, Beta," I said softly. "But you're here now. That's what matters." He nodded once, small and serious, then crawled over to his sister and lay back down beside her, pulling the blanket over both their heads like a tent. I went to the kitchen, made parathas, and tried not to cry into the dough. By noon the house smelled of fresh roti and the faint burnt edge of ghee I'd used too generously on the tawa. The children ate like they hadn't seen food in days. Small, careful bites at first, then faster, eyes flicking toward me every few seconds as if waiting for permission to take more. I kept refilling their plates without a word. Sometimes silence is kinder than questions. Zain wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and looked up. "Fuppo, Baba said we were going to Nana's house in the village. But then he turned the car around and said we had to come here instead." My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "Did he say why, Beta?" Zain shrugged, a small defeated movement. "He was shouting on the phone. Emmy was crying in the back seat. Then he stopped the car near the park, opened the door, and told us to walk to your house. He said you'd know what to do. Aisha's spoon clattered against the steel plate. She stared at her brother, eyes wide and shining. He said we were heavy, she whispered, that we made everything hard. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Not anger yet, just something hot and formless. I reached across and covered her small hand with mine. You are not heavy, I told her quietly. You are children. You are exactly the right weight. She nodded, but the belief hadn't reached her eyes. The afternoon dragged. I called my husband at the hospital between patients. When I told him, his breathing changed on the line, became careful, measured. I'll be home by 6, he said. Don't call Asif again. Let him come to you. I didn't argue. Around 4 o'clock the children asked to watch cartoons. I settled them on the sofa with a blanket and the remote, then stepped outside onto the small front lawn to breathe. The sky was already bruising toward evening. A neighbor's dog barked once, sharp and lonely. I stood there smelling the wood smoke from someone's chulha and tried to remember the last time Asif had looked me in the eye and told the truth. It was 2 years ago at our mother's kul. He'd pulled me aside after the prayers, breath smelling of cigarette and cheap whiskey. I'm in trouble, API, he'd said. Still calling me API even though we were both in our 40s. Bad trouble. Money. A lot of it. I'd asked how much. He'd named a figure that made my stomach turn over. I'd emptied both our fixed deposits the next week and given it to him. No papers, no questions, just a brown envelope passed under the table at a Daba near 0 point. He'd promised to pay it back in 6 months. For months later Saba started posting pictures of new furniture. A bigger TV. Gold bangles. I never asked where the money came from. I told myself it wasn't my business anymore. Now I wondered if that envelope had been the beginning of the end, or just one more brick in a wall that had been crumbling for years. At 6:42 my husband walked through the door, still in scrubs, stethoscope looped around his neck like a tired scarf. He kissed the top of my head without speaking, then crouched in front of the children. Zayn recognized him immediately. Uncle Doctor, my husband smiled, that gentle, tired smile he saves for small patients, and checked their hands and feet for frostbite, murmuring softly the whole time. No permanent damage, alhamdulillah. Just cold that would take days to leave the bones. He made tea for us while I bathed the children in warm water and dressed them in my daughter's old clothes. Too big, but clean and soft. Aisha kept smoothing the pink kurta over her knees like it was something precious. At 8:15 the doorbell rang. Asif stood on the step alone. No Saba. No car in sight. He wore the same leather jacket he'd had since university, collar turned up against the wind. His eyes were red-rimmed but dry. I didn't invite him in. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me so the children wouldn't hear. Where is she? I asked. Home, he said, voice rough. Packing. Packing for what? He looked past me at the streetlight. She's leaving. Tonight. For Karachi. Her sister's place. I waited. He rubbed the back of his neck. We fought. Bad. She said she was done carrying everything. I said things I shouldn't have. Then I drove the kids halfway to Mama's village because I thought maybe distance would fix it. But halfway there I realized I couldn't do it. I couldn't look at their faces in the rearview mirror and keep driving. So I brought them here. You left them on my porch at 4 in the morning, I said. Each word came out separate and deliberate. In pajamas. No shoes. In January. He flinched. Actually flinched. I wasn't thinking, he muttered. I just needed them safe. And I knew you'd take them. Something snapped inside me then. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a quiet, final breaking. You used me, I said softly. The way you've used everyone who ever loved you. You knew I would never turn them away. So you made me the safety net while you figured out how to ruin your own family. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked down at his shoes. I'm sorry, he said finally. The words sounded small against the night air. Sorry doesn't warm their feet, I told him. Sorry doesn't explain to a 6-year-old girl why her father thought she was heavy. He started to speak again. I raised my hand. Go home, Asif. Sleep in your empty house. Tomorrow morning come back with a plan. Not excuses. A real plan. Because those children are not going back to chaos. Not while I'm breathing. For a moment I thought he might argue. Instead he just nodded once. Slow, defeated, and turned away into the dark. I stood there until his footsteps faded. until the only sound left was the wind moving through the neem trees and my own heartbeat. Steady now, certain. Inside, the children were asleep again, this time on the guest bed. My husband sat beside them reading an old Urdu digest by the lamp. He looked up when I entered. What did he say? I sat on the edge of the mattress and touched Aisha's hair. He said he's sorry, I whispered. But sorry is only the beginning. The next morning came slow and gray. Rain tapped against the window like hesitant fingers, the kind of drizzle that makes everything feel heavier. I woke before the children, made chai, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the steam rising in lazy spirals. My husband had already left for rounds. He'd kissed my forehead at dawn and whispered, "You're doing the right thing, whatever it is." I knew what I had to do. At 9:30 Asif arrived. This time he brought Saba. They stood together on the porch like strangers forced into the same photograph. Shoulders not quite touching, eyes anywhere but each other. Saba's dupatta was damp from the rain, clinging to her shoulders. She looked smaller than I remembered. Makeup smudged under her eyes like yesterday's decisions. I let them in. The children were in the living room building a shaky tower with old plastic blocks. When they saw their parents, they froze. Aisha's tower toppled. Neither of them ran forward. Asif cleared his throat. "We talked all night," he said. "We're trying to fix this." Saba looked at me then, really looked. "I didn't know he was going to leave them like that," she said quietly. "I thought he was taking them to his mother's. When he came back alone, I lost it. I told him to go get them. He said he'd already dropped them here. I should have come myself. Right then. I'm sorry." Her voice cracked on the last word. She pressed her lips together hard. I didn't speak yet. I just watched the children. Zain had picked up one fallen block and was turning it over in his hands like it might explain something. "Sit," I said finally. They sat on the edge of the sofa like guests who might be asked to leave any second. I brought tea. No one drank. Then I spoke. "Calm. The way you speak when the worst has already happened and all that's left is truth. Last night I held your daughter while she cried in her sleep because she thought she was too heavy to be loved. Your son asked me 3 times if you were coming back, and each time I had to lie with my silence. You both made choices that turned children into weights. That stops today." Asif opened his mouth. I shook my head. "I'm not asking for explanations. I'm telling you what happens next. The children stay with me until you really prove that your home is safe again. Not perfect. Safe. That means counseling. Together. Not once, not twice, ongoing. It means no more disappearing acts. No more using other people's doors as escape routes. And it means you come here every single day until they feel ready to go back. You sit with them. You play with them. You listen when they're scared. You show up." Saba's shoulders began to shake. Silent tears ran down her face and dropped onto her dupatta. Asif stared at the carpet. "I don't know how to start," he said hoarsely. "You start by staying," I told him. "Right now. Sit on that floor and build blocks with your son. Hold your daughter's hand until she believes you won't let go again." They did. For the next 3 hours they stayed. No grand speeches. Just quiet, clumsy attempts. Asif's hands shook when he handed Zain a block. Saba smoothed Aisha's hair over and over like she was afraid the little girl might vanish if she stopped. The children didn't forgive them, not yet, but they let themselves be held. That was enough for one morning. When they left at 1 o'clock, promising to return after Asif's shift, I closed the door and leaned against it for a long minute. My legs felt like water. Later that evening, after the children were bathed and fed and tucked in with stories about brave little sparrows who learned to fly again, I sat on the edge of their bed. Aisha reached for my hand. "Fuppo, are we still heavy?" I kissed her forehead. "Never to the people who love you right." Zain whispered from his pillow. "Will Baba and Ammi come tomorrow?" "Inshallah," I said. "And if they don't, you still have me. Always." They fell asleep holding my fingers, one small hand in each of mine. I stepped into the hallway, closed their door softly, and felt the first real breath I'd taken in 2 days. Some betrayals you never fully forgive, but you can choose what you build on the ruins. I chose those children. I chose showing up. And maybe, just maybe, that choice will teach their parents what love actually looks like when it stops running. Now the house is quiet again. Rain still falling. A clock ticking somewhere in the dark. I don't know how this story ends for Asif and Saba, but I know how it continues for me. With small feet under my table. With trust that has to be earned back one ordinary morning at a time. with the kind of love that doesn't abandon, even at 4:30 in the morning. If someone left the people you love most on your doorstep in the cold, would you have opened the door? Would you still be opening it every day after? Tell me in the comments. And if stories of broken trust, quiet strength, and second chances mean something to you, stay with us here on Broken Trust Stories. There's always another door, and someone always has to decide whether to open it.